Okay, well, let's get started. So for everyone who's new, thank you for joining. Today, we decided to do this meeting style to get a little more FaceTime, get to know folks and participants a little bit more. This is going to be a little bit of an informal talk, so feel free, or intimate, I should say. So feel free to use the chat, engage with Ben in the chat. He's going to be taking questions at the end. This is recorded, so as always, if you miss it, for our members, we will put it on our member portal so you can rewatch it later, along with all of our past webinars and events that we have done. We do ask, so feel free to have video on. We do ask that you just stay muted. And if you're unmuted, we may go ahead and take some liberties and mute you just to make sure that the audio is totally focused on Ben until the Q&A section, in which case feel free to come on, say hello, and introduce yourself. So Ben's going to be taking it as he goes. And Ben is the founder of the, hold on, there I am. He is the founder of the Cannabis Certification Council. So he's a sustainability expert specifically in cannabis. He talks about this every day. So Ben, I will pass it over to you to get started.
Thank you, Lisa. Really, Lisa can tell you guys, I'm always trying to gas her up when I talk to her because I think that the CMA just does great work, and she has a reputation that really does precede her, and working with her and with Emily too, who carries a lot of water. You can see why that reputation is around. So I'm really honored and happy to be here today and to meet a bunch of new people, or whatever we call it in the modern times of Zoom. So it's great to see some new names and faces and a couple of familiar ones too. So thank you for coming. As Lisa said, my name is Ben Gelt. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I've been in the cannabis industry for a little over a decade now. I have a long history doing public affairs, strategic communications, all kinds of work, both with plant touching and ancillary, institutional, all types of businesses over the last decade plus. I have several interests of my own, and I think a lot of people know me for the sustainability work. So the Cannabis Certification Council is a nonprofit that I co-founded with a client like 6 years ago. Our mission is to educate the industry and consumers about sustainable and quality practices. So as Lisa said, I do find myself talking about sustainability in one capacity or another every day. I've been very privileged in so many ways, but I've been very privileged of late in the last couple of years to be able to also take on a lot of sustainability oriented projects and oriented companies as clients, and business opportunities in addition to the nonprofit work in the last few years. So I've been very lucky, and it's really a lot of fun for me to do this work. So with that, I will just kind of dive in. There's a brief outline of what this is about, and I'm just going to kind of go through that. I've pulled up a handful of different examples of companies that really kind of lean on sustainability as one of their main marketing tools and kind of brand identities, both from non-cannabis and from cannabis companies. And as Lisa said, and as I tried to really make clear, please interrupt me, ask questions. We're also, accustomed to being on Zoom, and I do so many of these things. So like, I'm watching the chat. If people are in there chatting, I will see it, and I'm happy to respond to stuff as it comes up. And really, I think it's really cool that we're doing it in this format. So don't hold back. If you have questions or comments, come on video. If you want to talk, whatever, let's talk. We have an hour, and let's see how much of it we use. So with that, if there aren't any questions, comments, concerns, which I don't see any, nobody's raising their hands or anything. All right. I'll just go to the agenda. So this is what I wrote. I said, sustainability can be a daunting subject. It's broad and hard to define, and consumers can't get enough of it. This panel, which is not really a panel, it's just me, will discuss the do's and don'ts of marketing sustainability as part of your brand. So I'm just curious. I don't know if there is a, how many of you have sustainability as part of your kind of brand or your marketing now. And folks can just either raise hands or say yes or no in the chat, whatever. Maybe, ish. Okay, ish. That's okay. So the first bullet here, if you're looking at the thing with me, start small. You don't need to single-handedly save the world, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That little line, which I'm sure you've all heard before, some version of, is something I say a lot. And it's something that I believe in greatly, and in the context of sustainability, it's, I think, really important to be comfortable with, hey, like, where are we today? What are we doing well? And what can we talk about that's positive today? And, the truth is that that alone requires some work. But I think, again, I hear this so much in my travels, talking to people, raising money, raising friends, trying to sell tickets, whatever, for our content, et cetera. People are a little bit daunted by this sustainability concept, right? Are we talking about waste? Are we talking about energy as a grower? Are we talking about water? What kind of resources? There's a whole other cohort of people out there like ACAM and the Doctors Knox that talk about sustainability in the context of health and wellness and equity. And really, that's how I've come to see sustainability, is that it is part and parcel of life, right? It is literally, it can be a frame, a lens that you look at anything through. And so again, I think that's part of why, if you're not already kind of in the space and like learning or have some expertise, it can be a very daunting subject. And so that's why I wanted to start with this point, to emphasize, hey, none of us are perfect. I think about my own personal consumption, which I still frankly, candidly find to be conspicuous, right? Like, I get in my car, I drive to the supermarket that's less than 2 miles from my house, I buy stuff in plastic packaging. We're all doing the same stuff. So none of us are perfect. Let's not say that we have to be perfect before we start to go out and find where we're doing, more than nothing. And so in that vein, the next 2 points: know what you're doing well, know what you're not doing well, strengths and weaknesses. So this really comes down to, what do you know about your business? How familiar are you with all the different phases of your business? Have you conducted any kind of audit or engaged in any effort to really understand what you're doing? And there are lots of tools out there to do these things. So, and again, without knowing a lot of folks in the composite of this audience, I'd be curious to hear if people want to weigh in on the chat. If you're cultivators, if you're processors, I presume most or all of you are marketers in whatever business that you're in, but I'd be curious to know what folks in the room are marketing. But again, it doesn't matter ultimately, right? Like, whether you're just a digital company that is like, say, Dutchy, and just doing all of this back end online stuff, there are still huge considerations for those types of businesses with carbon footprint. The use of the internet does cause emissions, as I'm sure all of you have learned by now. And there are plenty of tools out there, like from the BCorp world and other places, that can help businesses get a grip on what their carbon footprints and other things are like. So again, going back to what we're talking about, know what you're doing well, know what you're not doing well. Some of that can be observed by just looking around and understanding, hey, like, it seems like we must be burning a lot of energy because our lights are on 12 hours a day and we're using high pressure sodium instead of LED. That would, from my perspective, be a place where you might identify a significant opportunity to lower your profile. But again, the tools to measure these things vary. So a couple of examples just quickly. For cultivators, for example, there's a great organization that my organization partners with called the Resource Innovation Institute. Here is a link to their website in the chat. They have another website that I could also pull up and would encourage you guys to Google. It's the Cannabis Power Score. And it literally is a tool that, if you sign up for it, you can submit data to them, and they will generate a power report for your cultivation that tells you, here's your grade, between 1 and 100% of what you're doing with power and how efficient you are. And it comes with tips on how to get better. The same organization publishes reports on water and other natural resources, how to deal with waste. That's also content that we at the council produce. We are producing a series of deep dive events with a large variety of different partners. For example, here in Colorado, we're working with the Marijuana Industry Group, which is the primary trade and lobby organization for the industry in Colorado. And we're putting together these deep dive events for license holding businesses, giving them sustainability tips on best practices, right, that are also compliant. So far we've done organic waste, which is all of the waste that comes out of a cultivation facility. We've done water, another cultivation centric episode, and IPM. So all three have been cultivation centric, but again, it's all information that can help people reduce costs, improve sustainability, and remain compliant. So these kinds of resources are out there, and people like me are here to be a conduit to them. And again, coming back to the brief agenda, it's know what you're doing well, know what you're not doing well. And the first point, again, I think it flows pretty well. Start small, right? If you're not already deep in this space, raise your hand and ask where to start if you're not sure. Because again, there are a ton of great tools and resources out there. And you don't need to tackle the whole world at once. One of the non-cannabis examples that I pulled up was Patagonia, a brand I'm sure you're all very familiar with. They do all kinds of stuff to market their sustainable practices and postures and investments, et cetera. They didn't start, as this behemoth this way. They had it built into their ethos from the beginning, but they've grown, and as they've grown, they've added more and more here and there. So it's just they're a very visible example of a company doing a lot of visible work, but it's, I think, also a place where you can really look at how strategic deployments of time and energy and resources around these subjects can really resonate with consumers. Because of course we know now that Patagonia has this brand affinity, brand equity with fancy sustainability types of consumers. So I want to pause because I feel like I've been yammering for about 10 minutes straight. Do people have questions, comments, critiques, otherwise concerns? I'm also happy to keep going, but I'm watching the chat. Nothing. Looking for the faces. Seems like faces are doing okay. So nothing yet. Okay. So, and again, in the same vein, no detail is too small. And this comes back again to knowing your business better, knowing what your operation does and where the opportunities are. When it comes to what consumers are looking for, they're looking for companies that have an ethos. There's tons of data out there that show that consumers prefer brands that have any kind of philosophy. It's amazing how light of an imprint these philosophies really need to have. The consumers just need to be able to perceive it somehow. So, again, the thing that I really wanted to impress upon this audience today is that you don't have to get it all at once. That, there's a lot of tools out there that you can leverage to start to understand what the picture of your business really looks like when it comes to these things, whether it's the things that we think about traditionally with energy, water, waste, et cetera, or some of the things that are a little bit less simple to track, like, like workforce, what's the word I'm looking for? Happiness, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. How are people feeling in your company? Is your company truly well represented in the community that's in? Is your workforce an actual diverse group of people that is reflective, again, of the community that it's in? These are all steps that businesses can take to really become sustainable. So it's not always just about oh, what's our carbon footprint and how do we reduce it? It can also very much be about how are we involved in the place that we are? How do we fit? How do we benefit the people around us? How are we acting as a good neighbor? That is, to me, a really fundamental part of being a sustainable business. It means that the people around you are going to want you to be there the next day, which is very helpful from a business standpoint. So again, that is the length of the agenda. So I am very curious. Oh, there are some questions coming in. Thank you guys. Oh, lots of them. How do you deal with marketing and compliance issues, from Eileen? So, and we have some other smart people in the audience too. So if other people want to weigh in on some of these questions, please feel free to raise your hand and let's have a conversation. It's a great question. Obviously, with our cannabis industry, with marijuana in particular, compliance is always a huge, huge issue. The one of the huge opportunities from my perspective about marketing and compliance is if your marijuana business is, say, using highly sustainable packaging or using a highly sustainable approach to your cultivation or your processing, or there's something that you're doing that's really outstanding somewhere in your processes, you can talk about that in ways that you can't talk about market, or excuse me, you can't talk about product and other things that you're doing as a company. So there are opportunities to take those behaviors that are not necessarily directly connected to, marketing the product on the shelf, to highlight the business more broadly and create brand awareness and brand affinity for the broader company, which in turn can lead to interest in specific products and other marketing channels that you have. So that's what pops into my mind, is how do you deal with marketing and compliance? Don't fuck around with compliance, excuse my language, but we all know that, right? Like, nobody is here to talk about breaking any rules. I always tell my newbie kind of green to the industry clients, this is a compliance industry. So I hope that addresses the question. Eileen, I'll see if, I don't know where you are, if you want to come on camera or give a thumbs up or down, or if anybody else. Lily, I don't mean to pick on you, but you do know quite a bit about this stuff. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that question. And again, I suspect most of you are smart marketing professionals. So if people have thoughts, please weigh in. And Lily, you can say no. No pressure.
Yeah, it's a little loud in here right now. I have a appliance repair guy in here. But yeah, like one of my biggest rants is the thing about how cannabis sustainability focuses so much on like water and like LED lights, when there's so much more than what we can do. Of course, like if you're growing it in a nice way, that's a good thing, but there's so much other things that you can do. Like in like Heineken beer, the impact of the packaging is 70% of its footprint if it's a glass bottle. So we can also focus on that sort of stuff in our marketing.
Right.
Of course, I'm biased as a packaging person.
Yeah. Well, that's okay, Lily. And I think it actually, not that I think you're looking to do this, but it kind of highlights my point, right? Which is that I think there are huge opportunities to highlight these types of behaviors and practices within your business with PR, with non-traditional marketing efforts, with things that aren't so centric to, marketing the widget on the shelf, but really about creating brand awareness, brand affinity, where you can leverage these behaviors to say, hey, look, we're not perfect, but we're working to get better. And here's a great example of a really good thing that we're doing. Right? To me, you don't need to tiptoe around compliance issues, and if you just stay away from any of the third rails. So I hope that spoke to that, Eileen. And if not, please keep weighing in. And if you may have already, in which case I'll get to it in a second. So I'm a little bit up in the chat. Tyler asked, what's the best way to utilize and collect data for CRMs? So that's a very general marketing question. I don't even want to take a stab at that. So sorry, Tyler. There's too many other smart marketing people in here for me to talk about that. I will focus on sustainability questions. So sorry, Tyler. Lisa, what's the number one thing internet-based companies can do for sustainability, i.e. those without facilities or physical products? From Lisa. So this is a question that I have been grappling with, especially in this last year during the pandemic with the council. In years past, we have done live events and we've done things around those live events. Like we have requirements on like what venues we can go to and how sustainable they are and their energy and what they do with waste and blah, blah, blah. It's been, it's a little more tangible. With the digital world, and this is something I did touch on a little bit earlier, there are lots of tools out there. I would refer people to BCorp, and I'm happy to connect with people offline and do some introductions around to people that are in this mode of helping digital companies establish a sense of what their footprint is. The short answer is essentially is there are services out there that you can basically give data to, like, here's how many Zooms we do, here's how many people, here's like how many emails we send out, here's all this stuff that we're doing. And they can then essentially compute, here's, the amount of CO2, whatever emissions that a data farm or what, however the internet is powered, which I'm not going to pretend to know, how much energy that uses. So those kinds of tools are readily available. Most of them are free or inexpensive. And they're a great way for digital organizations like CMA or the council or a lot of groups in this last year to get a sense of what is our carbon footprint, even with these digital things. Because, on the one hand, it feels like we must be consuming less. I know that for us, we do these events, and I'm going to do some shameless plugs. So please forgive me in advance. We do the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium. We have one coming up this month in August. If you go to cannabissustainability.org, you can register now and see the speakers. And I also have a code for you lovely people. If you use the code CMAAUG, AUG, you'll get, I think, a 20% discount on the tickets. And I'll put all that in the chat as we get to the end. But there's a shameless plug for you. So, again, these tools are out there for groups like ours to understand what those carbon footprints are like. And there's a lot of other good stuff. One of the keynotes actually this month at the symposium is going to be a woman from an LP in Canada, Rubicon Organics, that published the first ESG report in the world from a cannabis company. For those of you that are not familiar with the term ESG, it's environmental social governance. And the idea is for companies and organizations to do their own ESG internally, to basically make sure that they have meaningful plans and SOPs, et cetera, for environmental issues, for social issues, and then for their own internal governance. It's become a more and more important frame for investors broadly in the world as they're evaluating companies. I'm sure many of you saw in the last couple of months that ExxonMobil has added now 4 activist board members to their board, and a lot of that has to do with the kind of incoming effect of ESG programming and reporting. So again, there's a lot of tools and resources out there, and I would shamelessly say that the symposium and the council are really good resources for these kinds of experts and information. Brandy asks, what are some sustainability concerns that are unique to the cannabis category, or are there any? Brandy, it's a good question. In my opinion, Ben Gelt, not the council, not anybody else, because at the end of the day, I'm like a good talking head and I learn and I'm a smart policy person, whatever, but I am not a scientist or an expert, or well, I'm not a lot of things. But in my view, the answer is no, right? Like, we take a lot of arrows as an industry. There was a report that came out this year from Colorado State University, which notably had no connection to the state of Colorado or like any of the many groups around the country or in this state that are doing work in sustainability. Anyway, they accused the shit out of us, right? They were saying we are like coal and gas and all this like very polluting extractive industry. And to me, it's a false dichotomy, right? For one thing, when you look at other industry, and particularly extractive industry, energy industry, there's certainly been social benefit to some of those things, but I think we can see that the cost is very high, right? And we have subsidized and hidden those costs, and now we're really starting to pay for it. It's only getting more expensive every second that we go by. And with cannabis, well, what exactly are we supposed to do for power, right? Like, one of the things that I suspect many of us learned this year was that the entirety of North America is on like 5 grids for utility, like including Canada, right? Like, we are so connected on this grid that is powered by all of this extractive energy and resources. Like, in what context is cannabis or any other industry supposed to operate other than plugging the fucking plug into the wall? Like, I don't know why I'm cursing so much, I apologize, but what are we supposed to do? So packaging is one where, again, we take a lot of heat, and it's an area where I am personally spending some social, political, personal capital to try and change rules, because in my view, it's totally antithetical to sustainability, to public health, to good public policy, to any kind of economic thinking, to require child-resistant packaging on non-activated product, right? There's a great study from a friend of mine up in Canada that shows that eliminating child-resistant packaging from cannabis would reduce our waste footprint by at least 30%. And it's a very tough issue. So I don't think that there is anything unique about cannabis. I think in terms of sustainability issues, I think that cannabis, however, does have a unique opportunity to engage on this issue and others. I think we're all seeing how much diversity, equity, and inclusion is now being kind of baked into how this industry is going to evolve, and like what that really means, how that actually is iterated and articulated in the world, we'll see. But we're seeing a lot of happy talk for sure, and a lot of attention. And again, we'll see what all that turns into. But I think just like in that category, cannabis is being somewhat told, like, you better deal with this. I think that there's an opportunity with this category for us to jump ahead and say, we want to do better, right? We know that there are challenges with the grid, and we're gonna do things like drive innovation on LED lighting, which is happening. Like, there are innovations happening in that space because of cannabis, right? They were already making multi-billion-dollar bets on LEDs because of traditional ag, but cannabis has accelerated it. So again, and that to me also goes back to one of the last questions, like, where are the opportunities in terms of how do we promote this stuff and not worry about compliance? I think there's huge opportunity to talk about the best behaviors. And again, for your own businesses, as you look internally and think about what can I do for my business, like, leave no stone unturned, or as my stepdad used to tell me, leave no turn unstoned. But I digress. Find it, find what it is that your company is doing well with, and highlight it. And if looking at it, hey, this is like a 1 out of 10, and we've got a couple of other areas where we're negative, right? Maybe that's not the best analogy, but I hope you follow. Like, you didn't find something that is just mind-blowing, and you also found some stuff that is a little concerning. I think it's still good to share the stuff that's positive and not hide the stuff that's negative. I really believe, and there's lots of, again, data that shows that consumers like companies that show that they have some sort of ethos or philosophy. They want to see companies that are about that triple bottom line. So I'll continue because there are a lot of questions. Thank you guys so much for doing that. Mary Jo asks, I work with brands and retailers throughout regions or nationally, using compliant and regulated multimedia options based on state, county marketing regulations. I also, she's just kind of weighing in. Sorry, Mary Jo. Thank you for that, Mary Jo. Look, again, and I'll just comment here. Obviously, we all know the regulatory environment with marketing is very challenging with our industry. And I would just, again, point out sustainability, practices, operations are opportunities to engage in aggressive, proactive communications, marketing, PR, where you're not going to come close to those third rail issues of pushing a product, et cetera. You are talking about a positive thing that your company is doing in the world and your community. And that should be really safe place for you guys to play. And I'll also say this, a little tongue in cheek, with the council, as I mentioned at the top, our mission is to educate the industry and consumers about sustainable and quality practices. So we get a lot of attention around sustainability, which is great. I'm appreciative of it. It is our leading kind of thing. And my perception of that, candidly, with all 25 or 26 of you strangers, is that sustainability, the way that we present it at the council, is a kind of a very safe space, right? We don't have any punitive element within our body to like punish you for not being sustainable, right? We're here to be a big tent, to educate, to pull people in, to share. And I think, that's really critical. Oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought. The question was, so I was going to say something tongue in cheek, so excuse me. So what I was getting at is the sustainability stuff is our kind of leading thing. It helps us make a lot of friends and win support, et cetera. The standards work that we do, in some ways, is what I'm even more passionate about. It's where we get into some consumer education. We have a campaign called What's in My Weed. We've recently launched a new, I don't really like calling it a web, I don't know what the fuck to call it. I think it was kind of a TV show. We're calling it Happy Plants. We bring in all these industry experts to talk about how consumers can navigate the marketplace to find products that reflect their values. Because when we go to the supermarket, or even when we pick a restaurant, it's pretty easy to do that, right? Like the supermarket, you never have to ask anybody where stuff is. First of all, there's huge boards that will tell you. And second of all, if you want the organic berries, if you want cage-free, if you want grass-fed, if you want all these things, it's really well marked, right? We don't need to ask the kid, putting the strawberries in the bin, which ones are organic. We know that the ones with the green labels are. So the point I'm getting to is one of the projects that I'm really excited about that, and again, I'll just shamelessly plug Lily. Lily has been helping us with is the organically grown cannabis certification. And the reason I'm coming to this is because there's an example where we are, in some people's eyes, going out a little bit on a limb, saying we're going to call this thing organically grown cannabis. And really the number one question I get is, how can you say organic? And I have a very good answer. The short answer is the FDA, the USDA, as soon as we say cannabis after organically grown, they no longer see it. They're doing this. If we just said organically grown and put out a green label that looked anything like theirs, we would get big fat cease and desist letters like yesterday. But so long as we are disciplined and say cannabis, they don't see it. We have multiple interactions, letters, whatever from them. We're here to test it out. And this is the point I'm coming to eventually, slowly, sorry, which is, if you're comfortable, I think particularly promoting sustainable practices, promoting some of these things that are not about promoting product, you might be willing to be a little edgy and perhaps take some flack from a state, because you're going to get a ton of attention for it if you play it right. Now, again, this is a little bit of a high wire suggestion, but this is what we've done with organically grown cannabis. We baked it into our plan that some state, some jurisdiction, somewhere may take issue with what we're doing. And if they do, I will be so happy, because at the end of the day, the things that I personally am really good at are talking, sending out press releases, and making points. So if the state of California, the state of Washington, or whoever wants to say you can't say organically grown cannabis, we're going to put out press releases saying this jurisdiction doesn't want transparency for consumers. This jurisdiction won't allow consumers to understand what they're getting. They're going to prevent us from doing something that there's no reason, no valid, rational law, rule, anything that says they can do. So I hope you take my point, which is that we have vetted this very specific idea a lot. But again, all the rules that I'm familiar with, and I would trust that you guys know them better, would say that you can talk about sustainable practices. You can talk about these things more openly than you can talk about a 10 milligram edible or the new cultivar that you're putting in your beautiful pre-rolls, etc. So sorry if that was too long-winded. Lily, you're the best. She wrote, so much of these cannabis sustainability focuses on ag, lighting, water, etc. But there's so much to do outside of that, packaging being a big one. She gives a good statistic: 4 out of 5 consumers say they will pay more for a sustainability marketed option. And it's a great point. And this is, kind of the premise of this whole thing, which is that we know that consumers have great affinity for this stuff. And I will say, to Lily's point, for those of you that are CPGs, right, consumer packaged goods companies, packaging is the #1 interface that your customers have with your brand. And you can tell a story through the material, through the branding, through everything that you're doing there. And to me, again, I perceive that that is one of the low-hanging fruit areas in the industry for brands in particular. There are so many interesting companies out there doing sustainable packaging. One of the things we actually hosted we hosted a Symposium packaging roundtable in May, I think it was, Lily. And we had like 9 or 10 packaging companies on there talking about their wares. You can go onto our YouTube page and find it, Cannabis Certification Council on YouTube. Also, I'm going to put my contact information. I'm happy to send stuff to people. Anyway, it's fascinating because there are a lot of sustainable packaging options. What's evident to me is that none of them are perfect. But again, going back to my very first point, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I know that, again, this is where kind of the rubber meets the road. And it's where one of the big challenges is, like, for retailers in our industry that are paying an effective 80% tax rate, right, because of the vagaries of 280E, a 3-cent decision on 50,000 pieces of plastic packaging accrues, and it really matters. And I think that, that's where I see a lot of decisions going the other way, right, where they're like, it's 5 cents cheaper per package for us to do this less sustainable thing. To me, I think ultimately, talking about sustainability, if you're constantly looking at just what's right in front of your nose, I think you're going to wind up losing sight of everything and just drowning. So, easy for me to say, it's not my money. I'm not spending it. I'm not looking at your budgets and having to make those decisions. But to Lily's point, if you tell a story around your 5 cent more per package decision, and even start to charge 5 cents more or 6 cents more to offset that, consumers want to hear this stuff. And again, knowing this industry, one of the things that I like to say that hopefully doesn't piss anybody off too much, but it occasionally upsets some people that I'm friends with in this industry that work for some of the great companies that we know. There are no brands yet in cannabis, right? Like, and the comp that I always give, which is maybe why people get a little annoyed, is RC Cola, right? I suspect we all know RC Cola. It's not Coca-Cola, not even close. And I just don't see an RC Cola quite yet with cannabis. And it's because we have this mishmash of states and you can't be everywhere. And part of it is all the marketing restrictions. Like, there's a lot of challenges. I don't say that to accuse anybody. It's really fucking hard. But, these kinds of decisions around practices and how you differentiate, how you present, are part of what's going to figure into who wins and who loses. And I think we all know as marketers, you either have to have either the cheapest thing that everybody knows and people are comfortable with, or you've really got to work hard to differentiate and get people to have affinity. And again, I think that this is a path that people can go down that's very effective. Lisa responded to Tyler's question with a very good tongue-in-cheek answer. Get a good CRM, Tyler. If the CRM make it hard, it's not a great CRM. That's why Lisa's so smart. She is smart. Austin asks, Alpine, also weighing in for Tyler. Lisa, is B Corp acknowledging cannabis? Last time I checked, they wouldn't touch the space. Federally, they're still very slow. There are different B Corp groups state by state. I can tell you here in Colorado, they have backed off of their intransigence. Sorry, that's a fancy word. Like they were really opposed to doing anything with us. Now they're willing to speak and they're willing to show up. So they're getting there, but it's still not quite there yet. Lily asked another good question. Ben, thoughts on things that are greenwashing and confusing consumers? Oh my God, there's so much there. You know, look, without getting into a really big rant on this, I mean, there's a lot of that, right? I think we are all cognizant that it's happening. You know, things that I watch for are like gratuitous use of the word green. Literally, like you see that in places where people are just putting green in the name of their offering in an effort to have people believe, well, it's in the name, it must be da 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 da. So, you know, my comment broadly would be, if it looks like bullshit, it probably is. You know, it's difficult to find really good certifications in the cannabis industry. It's one of the things that we're working on at the Cannabis Certification Council. The group that I mentioned, the Resource Innovation Institute, is doing some good stuff. I'd be happy to follow up with people more offline. Favorite of links, I'm going to put some links in here at the end. Thank you, Lisa. Green Media Options, Mary Jo. So I have a couple. I'm just going through. I'm sorry, guys. And if people want to come off mute or come on camera, like say hi, you guys. We only got 14 minutes left, so don't be shy. Austin, I hope you don't mind. He asked, do you know of any cost-effective alternatives to plastics for packaging in cannabis? Yes. Short answer. A lot of the options are plastics. Different plastic materials have different recyclability. Recycling is a huge challenge because it's not a universal, there are no universal truths. Recycling really comes down to what is available in your market in terms of the infrastructure. There are a lot of commonalities, but you know, some markets are better suited to deal with glass than plastic. Some markets are really only suited to work with number 5 plastics, etc. You know, in the interest of time, I won't go further, but again, I'll provide my contact information, and I have a great Rolodex of experts that have much more technical knowledge than I do, and are happy to connect. Robin asked, are there any good scalable hemp packaging solutions yet? I think so. Is the kind of equivocative answer I'm going to provide. Sauna Packaging just came out with some hemp dude tubes, I believe. And I think there are some other options. So Robin, if you want to follow up with me directly, I can connect you around and posit that question to some good packaging companies and see what comes back. Floor has a similar question. Lily points out a cannabis company that is a B Corp, Garden Society. Lisa, Robin, Austin. All right. Dharma Packaging, Lily recommends. I'm down to the bottom. See you guys, we got 12 minutes. We can cut early. I warned Emily and Lisa that I didn't put together a presentation. I wasn't sure how long I'd be able to vamp, but you guys asked a lot of good questions. So thank you. Are there more questions? Are there comments? Are there critiques? You guys, this is a meeting. No? Do people just want to come on and wave and say hello so we know that you're really there?
Hi, this is Tyler.
Hi, Tyler.
How are you? I wanted to know a little more about the B Corp certification and the benefits. I may have missed that already, but I did step out, so I'm sorry if you're having to backtrack.
Not at all. We did not get too in depth. Lily pointed out that there is, I suspect that's a California company that is B Corp certified. What I know is that they seem to have relaxed their kind of posture. I don't know that they've changed the whole framework of what they're willing to do, but they do offer a lot of resources just as a pool, I guess, or whatever you would want to call it. Like they have stuff that you can go grab from them to help you get a sense of your carbon footprint. And they have like a scoring metric tool that can help you understand where your business might rank in their metric. And again, happy to connect with people offline to share more. And then in the chat, I am now shamelessly plugging our symposium later this month, and I'm going to include the code. So there's that. Any other questions, comments? I'll take critiques. I know I'm a tall white guy, but I told you I like being interrupted. I'm not joking.
Hi, everybody. This is Mary Jo Patera, and I'm with a company called Talent Outdoor, and I don't want to take people's time up with the media options, but I've been able to place multimedia programs throughout the country in regions that are regulated and compliant and using green media if required. Very limited with cannabis, but there are a lot more options than you can imagine. And partnering with an agency or a specialist in the cannabis industry is key because of regulation changes so often in counties and states. And I'll put my email address in if you want to talk. And we also have classes for cannabis retailers and brand to kind of educate you on any changes, if that helps.
Thank you, Mary Jo.
You're welcome.
Questions otherwise? Otherwise, I'm sure Lisa's going to say thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Yes, I'm happy to, unless anyone else has anything. Feel free to introduce yourself or drop your contact information in the chat. These meetings also serve that purpose as well. We will edit this and send the recording out by the end of the week, so you can rewatch what Ben said, and we'll send Ben's contact information. And Ben, if you have any other supplemental materials, we can include that in the follow-up email as well.
Yeah, I'll send you a little thing with some links and resources and examples. And yeah, again, I'll just say again, one of the things that we're doing at the council is creating a really wide variety of educational content. So we have the symposium coming up later this month. We've been doing these deep dive events. We've started here in Colorado with the Marijuana Industry Group. Next up will be the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. We're also partnered with the United States Cannabis Council, one of the big federal trade groups. We're working with the Cannabis Council of Canada, which is the big federal trade group in Canada. So a lot of sustainability content and information coming up, and a lot of the deep dive stuff specifically is about compliant, best practice tips specific to different markets. So if you're an MSO or if you're in a specific market, please feel free to reach out and let us know if we're not already going to be in your market. We can certainly look at what it would take to put together that kind of content and programming for you too.
Yes. And yes, check out Ben's upcoming symposium as well. And if you're not a member of CMA or interested in joining, you can join the membership using the code webinar10 for 10% off. And I dropped the link to our events page in the chat. We do have an event coming up on the 17th with New Frontier Data. And then we've also got, every month we do a networking mixer, and we do them online through a separate platform called Gather Round, but we're considering testing this format as well, as far as doing a meeting and letting folks connect more in a group setting. Those are exclusive to our members only, as well as our Slack channel. So if you have any further questions or want to connect broader with the cannabis marketing community, definitely suggest you check out our membership, which is on our website. Or you can email Emily at membership@marketingcannabis.org, or me directly. I'm Lisa, the founder and CEO. You can reach me at lisa@marketingcannabis.org. And our next in-person event will be at MJ BizCon in Vegas. We're going to do a mixer for our members there, I believe on Thursday night. We're still planning it. So if you're planning on going to MJ BizCon in October, we actually have a discount code for you to register. They're running out on their early bird tickets, CMA BizCon 10 for 10% off. I think there's 3 days left of their early bird tickets. We'll be doing a mixer, and I'm actually going to be speaking about marketing best practices too. So we are kind of moving back to seeing you guys in person, and really hope that one will come through and we'll all be there, but we're planning on it. And yes, if you've registered, sign up for our newsletter. We send out tips, blog posts every week as well. But happy to chat with everybody. Thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We do our webinars on Tuesdays at 12 Mountain Time moving forward, and we're about ready to launch all of our fall programming as well. I can't believe how fast summer has gone, and it's already like early August, and 2022 is closer than not. So that's where we're at. So I hope everyone's doing well. Thanks again for your time. We'll leave this up for a little bit, including the chat. If you want to grab anyone's LinkedIn, again, feel free to reach out to Emily, myself, CMA, or Ben. Ben, if you haven't dropped your information, put it in the chat, and we will send a follow-up with his contact email, the recording of this, and any supplemental resources Ben gives us as well.
Thank you, Lisa. I forgot, if for anybody in the Denver metro area, we are also hosting a happy hour this month in Denver. So I put that link in there, and you can find it on our events page on our website. So yeah, come have a beer. First beer's on me if you're in town. And really, again, huge thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa, for this time. And thank you to all of you wonderful humans for showing up and listening to me talk about sustainability and stuff. So I love doing it. So thank you so much. And I hope I can, if people have questions, I'm here to help. So please don't hesitate to reach out.